My roommate has decided to start breaking cardboard boxes or something, so this might be a difficult audio to get through, but we're gonna do our best over here at TimeCapsule Studios. In my last video, I talked about Viren's selfish use of his children to prove his own value to the world. Viren doesn't really know his children because he thinks of them as expressions of his will. Viren's stated goal is to do violence to protect his children, but it becomes clear that he does violence to justify his use of his children. By choosing to die, he frees them. He allows them to become the people they are, rather than extensions of himself. So, who are his children, with and without him? I find Claudia to be just a particularly disturbing character, one I can't think about for too long without getting a knot in my stomach. She provides a startling example of how children come to authentically integrate their parents' beliefs into their own. Claudia is so different from her father in so many ways, yet he is so clearly present in all of her actions. People grow up to be very different from their parents on all sorts of levels, but in the ways that really matter, they seem to take up the torch of their parents' projects. This opens up all sorts of difficult questions about free will and destiny. How culpable can we hold children for taking on their parents' beliefs? Can we even call these beliefs those of their parents if the children go on to sincerely adopt them? Or are they complicit in whatever horrible acts follow from these beliefs? On some level, Claudia embraces her father's vision for her. Being a weapon in Viren's arsenal is a point of pride for her. She fits herself right in with his activities, even the particularly unsavory ones. She interacts with his prisoners. She can intuit his commands without being told. She provides for him in every way possible. But she isn't a computer. She wasn't given a set of commands to live by, and she didn't pick up her father's goals and ideas just because he wanted her to. Rather, she grew into the person she is as a result of the life she's lived and the thoughts and feelings she's experienced. The impact of her parents' separation and her mother's abandonment, the experience of having a really emotionally difficult father, her observations of the struggle and adversity that humanity as a collective has faced over the centuries, all of these things, plus her own unique personality, somehow bring her in line with her father's wishes. Kids are smart. They have a way of developing their own thought patterns and ideas, all while integrating the worldviews of their parents and societies. Have you ever been in charge of a child who is a total monster to adults, but is secretly really nice to other kids? That's them unconsciously coming to the conclusions adults want them to come to. Take the scene where Viren tells Claudia to save the dragon egg, at all costs. We see in Claudia's eyes that she has understood the gravity of what Viren is telling her. She angles her face down and shadow spills over her features. And then, half a second later, her face literally brightens up, and she seems to be her ridiculous, perky self again. But this is a guise. She is using her silly reputation to pose an awkward question that she needs to ask, but can't ask openly. When Viren seems too struck to answer, she assumes that it never even occurred to him that Claudia would ever let her brother, his son, die to get an egg. This satisfies her, and she plays off her question as a joke. But Viren understands the subtext, because he's taught her how to discuss the grislier aspects of their work together. Claudia is actually trying to understand her orders, and he clarifies, choose the egg. Claudia spends the earliest part of her life processing Viren's ideas in the back of her mind while developing into her individual self. And since Claudia is so ethically normal and well-adjusted, it took me a while to accept that she was going to follow Viren's path long-term. In retrospect, it seems pretty obvious, but the trend in shows like this tends to be that the villain's morally neutral teammates start off well-intentioned but needlessly cruel, then they get worse, and then they get better. Claudia's downward trajectory is kind of disturbing. Really disturbing, actually. I almost want to compare her to Oedipus in terms of tragedy. Over 5 seasons, you're waiting for her big change, and it just doesn't happen. Her entirely predictable behavior, well-intentioned though it might be, just continuously gets worse. Soren is a much more common villain variant, at least in the past decade and a half. He's a silly little Zuko boy, and while he doesn't express much remorse for the bad things that he's done, and he has the narrative agency of a Season 1 Bolin, we get the idea that he's, a good guy. But Claudia is almost like an Alphaba figure, getting ushered down a path of more bitterness and violence for being too well-meaning. That's book Alphaba, not musical Alphaba. Big difference. And this uneasiness I feel around Claudia is compounded by the fact that she is presented to us as a free thinker, and just a pretty liberated person in most respects. She certainly doesn't seem that concerned with her dad's approval. She's very self-possessed. She's idiosyncratic, quirky, unapologetically herself. I could be wrong about this, but I feel like she's the only three-dimensional animated character who actually has the confidence to flirt with their crush openly. She has an offbeat sense of humor, sometimes a really gross sense of humor. She's an eccentric genius with a love of both the morbid and the adorable. And she's pretty nice and empathetic, even though she's also a little bit creepy. And Viren is a bureaucratic, humorless asshole. If Soren is the Zuko to Viren's Ozai, Claudia is a very strange interpretation of Azula. How tragically ironic, then, that this free-thinking, non-conforming, confident kid is also the one least able to break out of her harmful assigned role. As in the last two videos I've made on this show, I'm not just interested in these individual instances of tragic irony. I'm focused on how this characterization furthers the show's theme of systemic generational violence. The Dragon Prince is about perpetuating cycles of fear that lead to death and loss. I have argued that love is that catalyst that turns fear into violence, and no single character embodies the linchpin in the show's theme quite as completely as Claudia. Unlike her father, Claudia is undeniably driven by a love for her family. She loves them so much, in fact, that on two separate occasions she significantly removes their agency and hamstrings their growth. She feels a compulsive need to keep her family unit in the exact same form it was in when her mother left. Otherwise, something undescribably painful might happen. The unknown is very scary to her. So, there's a scene in Season 2 where Soren gets injured. And it looks bad. Like, I actually kind of found it shocking. There's a little bit of gore in The Dragon Prince, but certainly not to the level that you would expect in an adult-oriented show of a similar kind. But just look at this. Oh fuck! His body is just broken, and he's terrified. This is a huge, symbolic moment for Soren, and he picks up on that right away. I said in my last video that Soren has been made to see himself as essentially a body for his father's use. So, with the loss of his body, he gains some self-ownership. And that idea is very exciting to him. He decides that he's actually happy to remain permanently quadriplegic. In a really touching moment, Soren decides that this is the best thing that could have possibly happened to him. He immediately decides that he's going to be a poet, and it's just one of the most lovely little scenes in the entire show. He's earnestly really excited for this vision of himself that he just conjured up. Listen to him! He's like stuttering with exhilaration.
I'm going to be a poet, and people will come hear my poems, they'll come visit me, and we'll drink some kind of soothing tea, and then I'll say my latest poems to them.
The revelation comes with a huge sense of potential. Soren becomes more childish in this scene, as we would expect from a moment punctuated by freedom. He imagines that he has a self to realize now, whereas in the context of his relationship with his father, he's expected to be a set of armor without a brain. Viren puts Soren's body on the line and doesn't provide much in the way of explanation, assuming that Soren doesn't need one since he couldn't understand it anyway. And then Claudia just takes that away from him. She gives him his body back without his consent. And it's heartbreaking. I really wanted Soren to remain quadriplegic. It felt so right, and raw too. What a fearless expression of how objectified Soren is in his father's eyes. His body is taken from him, almost like he's being digested by Viren's inflated self-image. I'd suspected that Soren's character had drawn inspiration from Jaime Lannister, and this event sort of clinched it for me. I thought Soren losing control of his body would force him to consider his worth and self-image beyond his ability to fight, the way Jaime losing his hand prompts him to consider the value he offers his family. Like Jaime, Soren would have to choose how he wanted to move forward with the knowledge that he can't be an unthinking sword anymore. It could have been an amazing journey of self-discovery. But at the same time, what? Am I gonna hate Claudia for healing her brother? Claudia's actions have this effect on me a lot. It's not just that you can understand every decision she makes, it's that every decision she makes feels like the only thing she could have possibly done. Killing an adorable little fawn is horrid, but if it means saving her family and Soren's place in it, she's gotta do it, right? A similar thing happens with Viren. In Season 4, Claudia has temporarily resurrected him, and she's trying to help him make the resurrection permanent. But Viren isn't so sure he wants to spend his last 30 days struggling to stay alive. He tells Claudia that he wants to live out his remaining time in contentment and tranquility. And you're like, yes, go do that. Go watch the sunset and eat cake for a month. Get to know your child. Stop grasping at life, because at some point it's going to outrun you and you won't have experienced any of it. But while you could argue that this ought to be his decision to make, it's also really selfish and insensitive of him. Claudia spent 2 years trying to bring him back to life. One of the first things she tells him is that she did horrible, traumatic things to make it happen. She slaps him for saying this, and I kinda think I would too. She's had to be strong and fearless for 2 years, and Viren can't even do it for 30 days? And like, Viren doesn't want to climb the mountain, right? He's kicking the can down the road, and Claudia can see that. So, once again, Claudia forces the continuation of a cycle that really just isn't very good for anyone. Claudia is Viren's superego, in a way. She seems to have sincerely adopted the values her father mindlessly espouses without any real internal clarity. Viren says he does anything, however dangerous, however vile, for his family, but as we discussed in my last video, that's not true of him. On the other hand, Claudia does do dangerous and vile things for her family. Viren is afraid of not being loved or important to those he cares for, but Claudia is actually afraid of losing her family. I think this distinction is valuable. Viren is a network of contradictions. He's a vague set of goals and ideas tenuously bundled together to form an ideological framework. In his struggle to protect those he's become responsible for, he makes bold and rash decisions. To be honest, I kinda think he was right to kill the Magma Titan. I don't think anyone from Zadia would have lifted a finger to save 100,000 human lives from starvation. So, fuck, man, eat the rich. But the fallout of each decision becomes worse and worse. Then you have to kill Avizandum because he killed Sarai, and then you have to kill Avizandum's egg because shit, we just killed that egg's dad. And the next thing you know, you've stolen an egg, turned yourself into a zombie, and your best friend and maybe on-again, off-again lover is dead. So what now, bitch? What now? Viren fumbles into a cycle of behavior he then justifies retroactively by making it sound like strategy, pragmatism. By contrast, Claudia is given a clear moral code by her father, which she interprets with a sort of dispassionate clarity. Viren has clearly gone through some stuff in his life, which has provoked a set of highly sensitive, pathological fears. But we get the sense Claudia hasn't had to be exposed to real suffering, at least not in the beginning of her life. Viren teaches Claudia his philosophy, and Claudia has learned how to intuit the darker aspects of his realpolitik. It's an academic exercise for her. With Viren's instruction in a safe environment, Claudia has grown up to be intelligent but naive. Her understanding of politics is practical to a fault, because that's what she's been taught. Claudia can't even imagine why Harrow wouldn't want to send a subject to die in his place. But Viren gets it. Viren being willing to die for Harrow wouldn't particularly be helpful in the situation as far as the kingdom is concerned. It's really not a very pragmatic suggestion if we're being honest. Harrow would be trapped in the body of a person no one trusts, and the one person with the ability to do anything about it would be dead. But, honor, friendship, trust, ephemeral, frivolous things that Viren does care about. Viren thinks that he has a special, loving relationship with the king, tells himself that dying for him is a fitting conclusion to his life. Harrow disrupting that script, recontextualizing the signifiers of their relationship, is what makes Viren so furious with him. Viren understands social, symbolic language. Sometimes it takes a great or dangerous act to champion a cause or make a statement. You can't fully think some things through because they're not strictly utilitarian. Why do you marry someone you love? Why do you lay a flower on a grave? Why do you make art? It's because our minds aren't pragmatism machines. They are far more attracted to and persuaded by symbols. They seek them out and deal with them in a way that feels emotionally correct. But these are things that we learn with age and time and experience. Claudia grows up in sort of a sterile, controlled environment. She's brought up in a castle. She learns a very specialized skill from a young age. And we know she's a good person. She's empathetic and steadfast. This innate kindness works within her inherited moral system, not against it. She believes in her father's principles about détente and his vicious brand of utilitarianism because she thinks they lead to good outcomes, and not because they flatter her ego, like some people. She has a sort of wide-eyed innocence about dark magic, seeing it as a way of converting the special into the human. And this despair is inherent to Claudia's character. She wants to do good, has a moral system set up for her to teach her how to do good. Everything she does is morally upright, or at least justifiable. But she does bad things, so we must conclude that the morality she was taught is wrong. Her fundamental sense of what is good just can't be right. She thinks that what's best for your family is going to be the best thing for the world, and that's just not true. In Claudia, Viren has refined his own worldview, and it has not held up under scrutiny. Throughout the time we spend with her, Claudia goes from being an exceptional student who learns all of Viren's ideas into an independent agent gathering her own set of biases and grudges. Seasons 4 and 5 do not depict a naive child trying her best to do what's right. Instead, we see a young adult who has matured into an understanding of history that fundamentally changes her beliefs and actions. In pain and struggle, Claudia's world has become a bit smaller. She isn't fighting for something she thinks the world needs. She's turned on the world to take care of her own. She's embittered with the pain of love. How does no one understand why she wants to protect her father? Why is everyone fighting her at every turn when she's just trying to do the right thing? At the end of season 5, Claudia loses a leg. It's a horrible price for a character who took on a heavy burden to make sure her brother's body remained whole. And she's not a cackling villain in her last on-screen moments. She's a deeply broken and injured person who keeps getting things taken away from her and she doesn't understand why. It feels like a cruel place to leave her. Who will accept an unspeakable moral stain upon their own soul to save her as she has done for others? Does Claudia have a choice? Does the question even matter? No one with a heart like hers deserves a life as wretched as this. And here's what Claudia's arc really says about the themes of The Dragon Prince. A society that cannot protect its children and most vulnerable will never become kinder and more pacifistic. It's not only a society's job to abstain from violence whenever possible, it must also actively teach and nurture its inhabitants. No one should be shunned or locked at the bottom of a sea or exiled into the desert. Because no one is fully responsible for their actions. We all inherit patterns of behavior, and most people who do bad things are trying their best with the minds they've been given. A social and political system should not be capable of taking a person like Claudia and turning them into a violent outcast. Something is still very wrong here. As an older teenager, Claudia has a specific role in the motivic language of the show. Not a child with complete freedom from grudges and fear, but also not an adult with that pervasive cynicism that ties up emotional energy with a need for domination and survival. She's an excellent use of the network of associations that we tie to teenhood. As we gain experience and knowledge, our moral codes tend to flourish, break, reform, spark to life in new and unexpected ways. And speaking of the symbolism of age, why does one of the oldest beings in the world, a creature of almost unfathomable power, concern himself with the petty goings-on of humankind? In the next video, we're gonna talk about and speculate on the character of Erebos. Yes, Daddy of Daddies, you remembered, good job! See you there. I didn't have a place to put this in the script, so I'm just gonna say it now. I was appalled by the fact that Soren and Viren's reunion, like, happened off screen, or I don't know what happened, but Soren sees him, has like a weird, overdone sort of comedic no moment, and like there's no recognition of the fact that like his father, who he thought was dead, and who he has this extremely complicated relationship, is fucking alive and seems to like his sister's boyfriend more than he likes him. Like, can we do anything with that? I just found that appalling. I don't get it. Anyway.